Welcome to another episode of the Dope Designer Club. My guest today is a very dear friend of mine, somebody who's ultra creative, Eames Demetrios.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, they just taped my mic, so that made it great.
The mic is working, yeah. So Eames is an artist, a writer. He is the president of the Eames Foundation. And he also runs this amazing project that I've been following for years called Kcymaerxthaere.
Kcymaerxthaere,
thank you.
You had it just before
I
we
had
started.
it. Or KCM. I love acronyms.
Casey. You got people call it KCY or Kai, whatever.
And,
but Kcymaerxthaere.
You know, when I was thinking of how would I introduce you, I really liked the title that you came up for yourself, Geographer at Large. So maybe you can start by telling us what that means to you.
So Kcymaerxthaere is a parallel universe I've created, and what we do is install markers that honor events from the parallel world and our world. And so, as I tried to think of what my title should be, I just always, there's like in certain cabinets of nations, there's the minister at large or the minister, minister without portfolio. And I just thought, maybe I'm a geographer at large, just roaming around, finding the stories of the parallel world and then honoring them and putting them out there and creating experiences for people.
I like it. What I like about that is this aspect of discovery. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you're making it up, you're actually discovering it. It's almost like an archaeological site, and we'll get into that. Mm-hmm. But another reason why I like it, and I don't know if you know this, my dad, who you know,
yes, I do,
is a geologist.
That's true.
That's true. And I think it's like, when I think about his kind of profession mm-hmm. and this geography, I think it always like reminds me of like adventure. Mm-hmm. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, the project for me has definitely been an adventure. And I think geology also is, because you're kind of dealing with the raw material of the earth itself. And so there's not really any shortcuts. You got to go to the places where you can see the evidence of what's happened in past eons and eras. And in the case of Kcymaerxthaere, there is a sense of discovery, and the discovery is not necessarily, I always have. I used to say that the stories don't relate to the place, and what I mean by that is that I don't take the story of a community and then kind of rework it and put it back. There's some artists who do and make amazing things. That's just not what I do. But what I realize is the moment it's installed, it actually is part of that place and that community, and so that's pretty neat as well. And
I love that. I love that. I mean, there's actually so many aspects to this project that I think even after an hour, I feel like we're gonna be looking back and like I'm gonna say like, oh, I wish I asked him this. But like back to the geography versus geology, I always kind of felt like geology could be like discovering things that happened like through time, and yours is like both through time and space. I also want to talk about like my first impression of you when I first met you, I think at the Eames house a long time ago. I was so impressed. I think you were telling some story about your grandparents, but like in generally speaking, like I feel like there's such a great storyteller. And so I feel like this whole project I think it's so appropriate for you because it's like you're just telling us these stories.
Well, I am very glad I thought of it because it's probably the best idea I ever had.
Oh, really?
Because it's such for me, it's a great combination. I mean, in terms of my strengths and the things that I'm passionate, I do have always liked telling stories. In fact, I now think of Kcymaerxthaere, and I think I always did, but I didn't quite put it this way for a little while. It's basically a global sculpture made out of narrative. And so it has physical components to it, but a lot of it happens in the minds of people. I mean, we did an installation on the island of Madeira, which is part of Portugal, and the local Catholic priest had allowed me to do an installation in the plaza of the church. Wow. And so it took longer to install than anybody expected, which does happen. And so said, to Father Rui, I'm really sorry, but we're basically getting done Saturday night, and I'm going back, and so we have to dedicate it on Sunday. Are you okay with it? I mean, this it is your church. And he said, no, this is no, absolutely. In fact, Mass ends at 10:50, and that's why I want you to schedule the dedication, because he loved the idea of his parishioners coming in, all having a chance to see it. And when we did it, people gathered around, and they were really, uh, they were very generous in their sharing their feelings and the fact that it was there. But also, they really liked this idea that this was part of the story that was there, but another part is another place. Is in Indonesia, is in the U.S., is in Philippines, all these different places, and that kind of connection. And that's one of the really lovely things about it, is that sense of connection between places.
I love that. I love that. So you mentioned like how your story is sort of, I mean, you made it up, right?
Mm-hmm.
But somehow you also connect it to the community. But then there's also this global network of these sculptures. I guess my question is like, why is community so important to you?
Well, I think that it's something we all draw strength from when it's functioning, and we all feel a little bit weakened when it's not. And I think that in the case of this project, I try to be, or I am clear with people that I'm not telling their story. And sometimes people say, why aren't you telling our story? And I always say, you should tell your story. What can I say after a week that's going to be really deep and profound? But maybe I can give this other gift, which is a sense of connection, like you say, global community. And then there are other things that we do. For example, the book that's behind you, we're translating all the installations to date into every language that an installation has been in, so that we can give a copy to a library or school in each community, so they'll have people have access to the whole story in their own language. Because there are two things people say all the time these days. One is everybody's online and everybody speaks English, and neither of them are remotely true. They're sort of true, and we kind of know what people mean, but if you really think about it, most people are not online in the same way that probably you and I are. And then as for speaking English, English is definitely the number one second language in the world, but it's that doesn't mean everybody's speaking it. So it has also been great, talking with the translators and learning how different languages work as we kind of dissect how to tell the story in a different language. And another part of the community aspect is that we've done in some places drawing exercises where people draw interpretations of the stories. And part of the point of that is that, like when you see the movie of a novel that you like you may think, oh, it's a great version. Then your friend is like, oh my God, how can they cast that guy? It's just awful, ruined it for me. And so we have very personal feelings about the words we read and the stories we hear and the stories we read, about how they unfold and and what they look like, even though you both read the same pages of the novel, but you brought a different, very different idea from it. And so I wanted to channel that with we call them disputed likenesses. So to have so there's a creature called the Nasian, which is in Kcymaerxthaere, which is a 7-legged deer-like creature whose prime-numbered legs are very nutritious, and the non-prime numbered legs are poisonous unto death. So good to have done well in math. So anyway, so that's a story, but it's a really fun creature to draw because there are many, many right answers. And we even worked with some carvers in Armenia who carved their interpretation of what the creature looked like.
I love that. I think there's like so many different things, like with what you just said. I really like how, you're not trying to appropriate culture, but you're inviting people to participate and use their own imaginations.
Yep.
And I really liked a while ago, you and I worked on an exhibit of tapestries that were produced by this tribal community, and they were just so colorful and beautiful, and they were similar. They embroidered scenes from the stories that you shared with them, and I thought that was just so beautiful.
Yeah, it was more a community, not exactly tribal. It was a group of women in Namibia who after independence, which happened around the same time that the AIDS epidemic happened, they were really stigmatized. They had gotten HIV and there was no way to support themselves. And a remarkable woman named Martha Walu formed this collective so they could start to support themselves. And then, people from many different backgrounds in Namibia participated. And there's a very, very traditional, beautiful way of sort of recording everyday life. And so they would make beautiful placemats and bags and things like that, and just tapestries as works of art. So I thought if that skill could be used to tell the stories of Kcymaerxthaere, it would be great. And we all had a great time with that project. And in their gift shop, they still definitely sell more of their the traditional ones. But what's interesting is that that people often look at traditional crafts in a way that sort of implies that well, everybody in that culture can do it, and it's not really true. And so by seeing the flexibility of their skill to tell the story of the parallel world and do other things, it was actually a way for them to help people understand that it's not a commodity, it's a skill set. And it's like when people at the Olympics, they say, oh, so and so is a natural athlete. It's like, and who spent 18 years preparing for this moment, give them a little credit.
Yeah, I love that. And then you mentioned like how everybody obviously has a different way of interpreting these stories and imagining like what these creatures and characters look like. And like when I started making, like when I had this idea of making this podcast, like I always felt like we are all like creative in different ways. So a lot of people still think oh, she's an architect or designer, she probably like is interviewing other like interior designers or and I think one of the reasons I wanted to do this is to kind of showcase how we all have this kind of innate talent to imagine things. And so I love how you're trying to encourage people to kind of use their imagination.
Yeah, I think that I think people love stories, and I think that we get a lot of heavily mediated stories now, whether it's the the blockbuster movie or whatever, and this is actually in the end, a pretty simple form of storytelling, whether or not I'm doing it verbally to a group of folks, or you just come upon one of my installations and you read the story to yourself and you kind of take it in. At the same time, your mind is telling you the story can't possibly be true in our linear world, but all these other clues are telling you you're really there. It's the wind's blowing, or the sun, the sun is hot, or it's cold, or whatever these clues are that tell you you're really there. And I think that tension is a really great space for the storytelling to live. And I think the other thing is that you mentioned that I'm the director of the Eames office, and one of the things that's important about the Eames work is they were very interested in this idea that creativity. Oftentimes when we talk about creativity, we say, well, that's kind of the province of the arts, and they believe super strongly that creativity exists everywhere, and that we're sort of doing ourselves and our culture a disservice when we say that the arts are where creativity lives, when actually it should be part of everyday life, and a much broader definition of the creativity it takes to be a good surgeon, to be a good gardener, all these things that we may not normally be what some people mean by it. They really wanted to make sure it was everywhere.
I love that, and the creativity to create a whole parallel world, right?
Fair enough.
When you said like storytelling, also like you're giving us these clues and like that it's real. How you said like the wind is blowing or something that's kind of believable. I also like
I mean,
in
the place is giving you those clues.
the
I'm not
place,
giving them.
right, right, right.
It's just there. You can't help it. Doesn't matter what's happening. It's telling you you're really there. That's how
Yeah.
humans work.
But I feel like also the stories that you're telling, about the parallel universe to me personally, like they almost remind me of mythology,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's a myth, like it maybe actually really happened,
Mm-hmm.
or it's happening, but like in a parallel universe.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was a little girl, and I made my mom like read to me a lot. And one of my favorite things was Greek mythology. And so to me, it's kind of like that, where they are fantastical creatures or
Mm-hmm.
situations, but there's something definitely real about it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, I think that when we hear stories, especially as kids, but in any time, I mean, there's a bit of transporting that goes on, and they can happen when when people say they binge watch, even when they binge watch a TV show, they're kind of usually that's happening because they've just gotten pulled into that world and they just can't wait to get the next, the next hit of it, the next experience of it, and make it as continuous as possible. And I think that there is an aspect to the stories which is, I mean, it's not. I did love hearing the Greek mythology, and and their my dad's mom and dad, who died when I was relatively young, but they were also quite good storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's something that, and I think it's one of the things that makes people people. Is that, I mean, every culture there's some story of storytelling, and it's why in cultures writers have a special value and often are very threatening to the establishment, one way or another, because they're telling these stories that, even if they're fictional, are kind of zeroing in on a truth that they just have found, but may not be appealing to the authorities, and that's why those figures are very more important than what their book sales might say, whether they're even known in other lands, and but yeah, I love reading. I mean, I read a lot of history, a lot of things like that. Was very interested in natural history as a kid, and science. So yeah, it all ends up in the mix.
So I mentioned you mentioned your grandparents. You are also partly Greek. Tell us about that.
So actually the storytellers I'm referring to are my dad. So my father's father came over from Greece in about 1910 or so, and he was from a part of Greece that at that time was still under the Ottoman Empire, because after the Greek War of Independence, basically that was Athens and South that got independent. So it was a little while yet before northern Greece became part of the country of Greece, and so the political entity as opposed to sort of the cultural entity. And so anyway, he spoke about 5 languages, no English, but his father died when he was relatively young, and so an uncle was not a very good trustee of him, you might say, and so his aunt said, "You got to get out of here. You got to go to America," and he did, and he was a shoeshine boy in Boston, and he was sketching his clients, and somebody said, "You're too good to be a shoeshine boy," and gave him a scholarship at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. Oh, wow. And he became a sculptor, but very much in a naturalistic style about the human figure. Sometimes, the animals as well, but very, very realistic. Didn't really actually have much use for modern art, but he was an amazing teacher. Lots of people took classes from him, and it was on a place called Gloucester, which is on Cape Ann, which is sort of opposite Cape Cod, around on the northern shore, about north of Boston. And he was a pretty amazing guy. And then in my father, but he also didn't speak Greek around the house, but he was sort of important to his local Greek community. And he had a great garden, and he was an amazing person. And I'm glad I got to know him a little bit. I take one of his classes.
I love that. You know, as you were kind of describing his story, like I see so much of that in you, the
Mhm.
way I kind of perceive you and your work, because like you could have just been an artist like doing like sculpture, or like you know how people define like professions.
Mhm.
Oh, you just do this. Like, oh, you're an architect. You
Mhm.
just draw lines on a piece of paper that make buildings. You know, like, and I think what's so great about so many creative people is that it covers more than one medium. You know,
Mhm.
you do these sculptures, you do the stories, like there's also a language component to it, and I'll get to that with the
Mhm.
symbols, and you do this like really like important and cool and inspiring community work, so it
Mhm.
kind of like it's multidisciplinary.
This project's definitely multidisciplinary, which I really enjoy, and it's and I feel like we get um I get better and better at that part, and you know they're like when I say we in this case, they're I have a few colleagues that work with me, and we just did this like 100-yard installation in Bangalore under a freeway overpass, and the my I heard about this group called Be Fantastic, two groups, Be Fantastic and Jaga, and they were taking responsibility to make the areas under the overpasses more beautiful, and I was very excited, which I don't think most people were, because what I have a whole story in Kcymaerxthaere about a culture that made roads for music instead of for transportation. So this was to finally find a place where we could actually do an installation that kind of took over a overpass was really fantastic. And then we carved this like 13-ton stone, which is this musical instrument, and we're starting to work on activating it so there's a performance each month. And then these amazing muralists in the middle of the pandemic, we did a workshop where it was about a little over like almost 2 month intense conversation about the stories and kind of working on what and the story that was there and the stories in general, and then teams of them um, uh, collaborated on specific murals, and it turned out great.
I
Yeah,
love that. I
yeah,
love
it
that.
was pretty groovy.
Very, very cool. Very cool. So, you know, you do so many of these things, so many of these like installations and sculptures are, you know, all over the world. Some are underwater, some are at really like inaccessible places. There's one in Joshua Tree. Um, Actually, when we originally wanted to do this interview, one of the ideas was, why don't we do it there? But then we're doing it here, and it's technically speaking, even this is like so
No,
challenging.
I think you did the right thing.
So, out of all of those maybe locations, do you have like a favorite one, or like one that stands out?
I mean, I really do love them all in different ways. I will
Mm-hmm.
say that the one in Joshua Tree is important because it was the first really big one that we did. Even though it's not, it's not a football stadium, but it was a small wrecked cabin that we sandblasted and painted and created the story for, and that was a great experience. So that was kind of a breakthrough, and it was really early in the project, so it kind of made having larger installations part of the idea in a
Mm-hmm.
very organic way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the one underwater in Bali, we actually have three that are underwater. Two of them are bronze plaques that are underwater, and uh, one I really hope I get to see again. But that it's in 60 feet of water off the coast of Scotland, so it's really cold, and I'm not sure how many people have ever visited that one. But it's there, and that's kind of cool too. Um, but the one in Bali is one that uses the shape language, the Kcymaerxthaere shape language, the Elevate, and it it was really great working with the local fishermen's community, and they were already doing things to create artificial reefs. And so I said, well, as long as you're doing that, maybe we can do one with sort of the vocabulary of Kcymaerxthaere. And it took a couple of years, but it turned out quite cool, and now um, it's pleasantly um, helping be a community for a lot of critters. And
Mm-hmm.
then on land, the text is covered, but we're creating these things you can dive with, so you can read what is there, but also you can get the story on shore as well.
Also, you're wearing this shirt that has like a lot of colorful symbols, and I'm sure it has something to do with it.
It does. It does.
Of course.
This is the pattern. So I mentioned that the one we just did in Bangalore um, is a story of a culture that makes roads for music, and
That makes roads for music.
and not for transportation. And what they do is that they make ridges in the road and textures in the road, and then sometimes they use hills for for momentum for human powered vehicles, but they're also non-human powered vehicles like these creatures called the Gagalovs, who are creatures of density.
You're totally like blowing my mind right now. Like with just like like
It's just I'm just telling you what's going on in Kcymaerxthaere. I'm just a humble geographer.
Yeah.
So but the Agagalabs are creatures of density, so they don't have any metabolism, but they have a density so strong they have even a little bit of gravity, and they travel through the earth. And so, since the Tehachapi, who are this culture, has sort of you can't really domesticate an Agagalab, but you can ask it to help. And so they use that pull of gravity to pull their vehicles, almost like a magnet under a table kind of thing. And so the point is that they tend to be wheeled vehicles of different kinds. Sometimes the wheels have textures, but it makes so the civil engineer of the road is really like the composer.
We just filmed another episode with Jaime, who's another podcaster. His podcast is about unusual sounds that happen only in like one place in the world. And his first episode was filmed in, actually, it's just a sound podcast. It's not like this. And it's filmed in Zadar, and there's a sea organ there. This architect made a sea organ, so the sea produces the music.
So
great. It's like, we're getting close to like your parallel KCM world here too.
No, that sounds great. I mean,
That's
this
amazing, yeah.
So this is So what we did in Bangalore is we carved a 13.5-ton stone, and it's underneath this overpass, and it has a lot of different textures on it. So what we're also doing is activating it with a number of different performers to see how they play it.
Amazing.
And it turned out really well. But this is the texture it has on it. So there are different areas where, like, if you drag a stick over this one, it's different than this one. And so this was sort of our line to kind of figure it out. And then we painted this on the underside of the freeway. So like, I don't know if you can see it, but like this shape is a shape word meaning tenderness. So I was really interested in this idea of how there's some writing in our linear world that, and like hieroglyphics, where and pictograms, emojis, exactly, where it's a visualization of something, it's representation. But actually, in when it comes to spoken words, onomatopoeia is not that common. I mean, it happens, and there's some, but like the word for stone in English is obviously stone. In Spanish, it's piedra. They're not all that close. And so therefore you can't assume that the sound of it is going to tell you what the meaning is. Like in German, the word for gift means poison. The word gift means poison. And in English, gift means a gift. So
now in my mind, I'm looking for words. Like I'm searching.
Exactly. So I'm expecting a list in my email tomorrow. But the point is, I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have a language that was physical, but was spoken and manifested? So in Kcymaerxthaere, it started with creatures who were they're biologically aquatic. So basically gone back to water. So humans that are biologically aquatic, who live where the oxygen vents were so intense they could just breathe the water. But it's very hard to talk underwater. I'm sure as a little girl, you tried to talk underwater in a swimming pool. No great results, I'm sure. So they had to use their mind to psychoform these shapes. And that became this vocabulary, which turned out to be a much more universal language, because there are so many creatures in Kcymaerxthaere that don't have a metabolism. They just, there's the Ixthydra, there's the Ravangs. I mean, Ravangs have metabolism, but they don't speak in our way. But there's storytellers and very good conversationalists. So these shapes became that, and became kind of the common language. a lot of people know that in 19th century Europe, the diplomatic language was French, no matter what country you were from. So a kind of pigeon form of the shape word language, Bejuan Nielvate, became the sort of common language of Kcymaerxthaere.
I like this idea of like shapes communicating or becoming the building blocks of like an entire language. You know, as an architect, we think you know, big egos here, you know, that our space like communicates or shapes people's lives, you know. So as an architect, I definitely kind of see that. But I also feel like your shirt is so fun and happy and colorful, you know. But I like that there's actually like meaning behind it too. So.
Yeah, and I think that it kind of, you know, that's part of the, as people get into the world to you know, have that word mean tenderness. And we did recently in Sumatra, we did an installation at a place called Bukit Aslan, which and the story there's of puzzles and living paper, and it's about people that would send a message and tear it up and tear it up and basically toss it into the universe, and we get sent in many different dimensions, and whatever the right time was, it would come together, maybe in the past or the future, or whatever. So we made one of those messages in the Elevate, and our partners there, the folks at Bukit Aslan, they gave a prize, a motorcycle, to the first person who figured out the puzzle, because basically the installation is a giant dictionary of shape words. And and so
it's like a puzzle. You have to figure it out.
It was about 2 months before the motorcycle was acquired by somebody.
Oh wow!
So it was not easy.
Oh wow!
So yeah,
kind of like an escape room challenge.
Exactly.
Cool. Just so many things. Like I feel like, you know, we're just scratching the surface here. Another, I guess, thing I wanted to talk to you about is maybe a little more personal. Like that's what I was planning for the second part of this interview. Maybe you can finish the sentence for me. A risk I took that changed my life. ...
I think that, well, I guess the risk, when I did the first Kcymaerxthaere site, I was thinking about it for a long time. I thought it'd be really cool. What I was really thinking was, wouldn't it be cool if you could visit a fictional place? And I kept thinking about it, that, you know, because sometimes we, like, there in San Francisco, there's like the, you know, the Maltese Falcon tour, so you can go to all the places in the movie and the book and all that. And I thought, I kept thinking, you know, it'd be cool to just put up a story in a plaque and just have it there and people read it. And it took a long time for me to finally realize that nobody was stopping me. If I could get the permission to do it, I could do it. And then somebody had read something who's now a friend, had read some of the stories I'd written, and said, you know, do you want to do a show of your photography around that? I said yes, but as long as you let me install a marker permanently on that. And but it took a while to even realize that was the idea that I was poking at all that time.
Interesting. So this idea of like taking risks of this nature, do you recommend it to people?
Well, I think that risk in and of itself is easily found. I mean, you can do a lot of. I mean,
you
risk.
Can jump off a building.
Exactly. Like, so risk is not inherently good, but if you start to analyze why you're feeling it's risky, and turns out that, you know, that action that you're thinking about, why it feels risky, and you unpack it and realize, well, you know, what is the risk? The risk of embarrassment is the risk of losing time, losing money. I mean, when you start to analyze it and experiment in your mind with it. So like I said, I think it's it's like so it's easy to find something risky to do, but what's harder is to kind of take it to say where are the opportunities, and then are they as risky as I think they are. I mean, my risk for that thing was I would look really silly. I would
would anyone get it?
Would anyone get it? Until I did a lot more in the first. I mean, I sounded really crazy. I mean, you guys may think I sound crazy now, but I really sound crazy when they're just 3 installations. I was like, no, really, it's part of a big thing. Now we're up to 149.
Oh wow,
in 30 countries. So at least you have there's a vibe, whether you think
like
it's
a
good
movement.
Yeah, well, it's not carried away, but it's a it's a very large installation, and it's a very large canvas. Actually, is a better way to think of it. And I do think of it as the sculpture made of narrative, because when you read it, even if you don't like it, you're piecing the puzzle together, and you may conclude that you may conclude this is dumb, and that's okay. One time we did one in or the one that's in Joshua Tree. It's one of these very ruined cabins, and I think it's beautiful. And so we were there, and so I was giving tours of one of these events, and some people were totally into it, and somebody came outside as they were leaving. He's like, "How can you stand in front of that pile of junk?" So so it's but that's okay.
But that's okay. Yeah. I definitely want to say that, like, every time I talk to you, like, my mind is like constantly like, well, stimulated in a sense that I feel like I'm always like a part of like trying to figure out like what your puzzle is, like with words, with these symbols, with imagination. And I think like what you've done goes like even beyond. I think you're totally right. I think it is cool that you can visit a fictional space. Like that in itself is like, it's a trip, right?
Yeah, no, it is, because you conjured up for yourself, and that's the other thing, is that I didn't want this to be tricking people. I mean, some people are definitely confused when they first see it, but there's not really an attempt. I wanted instead to be that. I wanted to be a suspension of disbelief. And which is what happens in a novel, because if you stumble across one of these, one of the reasons we put the website on it is not for promotion per se, but mostly we wanted, if people are really stressed out about this, they can go on the website. It's very hard to spend any time on our website and not realize that this is a giant artwork. And that's okay, because if it's just, because when I was mulling over this idea of visiting a fictional place, if you focus too much on the illusion, it's really easy to break the illusion. First of all, the neighbor can just say, "Hey, you're looking at that stupid thing again." Oh, well, wait, what stupid? And then they explain. So it can't be about. I mean, everything is a huge amount of things are an open game now.
Oh yeah.
So if you're trying, I mean, like 20 years ago, which is an eternity, maybe it's even probably 25 years, there was a movie called The Crying Game, and it had a twist, and the ad campaign was, "Don't reveal the secret of the crying game." Now, I mean, that wouldn't even make it to the premiere. That secret wouldn't even make it to the premiere.
Right.
And it's and so I just didn't want to be in that space of telling people, "No, don't tell your friends that tell them whatever you want."
Yeah.
Tell them this artist did this. Tell them this idiot did this. Tell them, some people have told me that in their community, when they have visitors, they don't tell them anything. They just take them over there, and that's their thing.
I like this like dichotomy in your work, where it's like, we don't know what's real, what's not real, but isn't life that way anyways? Like, what is the truth? We're just interpreting our own world in our own way anyways, with the limited senses that we have, but what I also like is this dichotomy also of scale. Like things can be very small, like a symbol, but it's also, there's 149 sculptures scattered across our entire globe, which is the only thing in space that we are a part of. I mean, at this point, I guess. So I just love that there's like all these like contrasts, and it's inviting us to like, use the whole spectrum of our, like little brain trying to process it,
And there are also hidden messages in some of them, and there are patterns that you can only see once you start to see a number of them, which again is the way it is with language. I mean,
right.
linear languages.
Yeah. And I like that there's a playfulness, like when we're children, we're always we use our imagination so much more than when we're adults, most adults, I'd say. And so I think it's so lovely and playful and free.
Yeah, I do hope people have fun with it.
Yeah.
Don't let it think it's all seriousness.
Okay.
It's really because I think that's there's something nice about being surprised by something. We have things we're comfortable with, and then we also, there's always this tension. You want to go to your favorite place, but whether it's a restaurant or a bookstore or whatever store, but what's your first question? What's new? What's the special? And so we have this tension between comfort and repetition, but at the same time wanting some kind of novelty.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. What's new?
It's the first thing, and it's just funny.
It's natural. It's almost natural to us. Another personal. This is like a personal series now of questions. The person that challenges me the most. Sorry to put you on the spot.
I'm sure it's I mean, my kids are older now, but they were definitely had lots of great questions, and they were very challenging in a good way.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Give us an example of a challenging question.
Oh, like the
and why do you think it was challenging?
No, I mean, challenging is not a bad thing.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, I think talking about the project and asking how it worked, why you're doing it, things like that. Some not unrelated to some of your questions. So I think that was really a great process, and both our kids have participated in specific installations. We've done a couple of road trips where we just went from place to place installing things. It was really good.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. What is the book that you recommend most?
Einstein's Dreams.
Why?
It's a very Alan Lightman. I'm trying to remember the name. Alan Lightman is a completely legit, well-regarded astrophysicist, and he wrote this book, which is a work of some kind of fiction, and it's a very unusual book. And basically, if there was a period of time when, and it's in some ways, I mean, obviously you can't pin it all down, but there was like a 5 or 6 month period where Einstein was working out the ideas. He had a year where he made three major scientific breakthroughs, and and one in particular is the theory of relativity. And so Lightman posited that, or writes a book which is basically Einstein having all these dreams about different ways that time could work. Could it be what it would be like? And I think it all takes place in Bern, because I think Switzerland, because I think that's where he was at the time. But he imagines everything happening simultaneously, everything happening out of order, and I don't do justice to it. And each chapter is not terribly long, but by the end, you're kind of really thinking about all these different aspects and of how things could be, because it's all about different possibilities, and it's really good, very thin, to not a huge,
Einstein's Dreams.
Einstein Dreams. It's really great.
Do you dream about KCM parallel?
Yeah, I have a lot of waking dreams about Kcymaerxthaere. I definitely dream as well at night, but I'm just always kind of thinking about this world.
Oh, interesting. So cool.
Yeah.
I'll definitely
Yeah,
order it on
yeah,
Amazon.
It's great. It's really great.
Another personal question. So between hosting
Hmm.
and being hosted, I prefer ... Do you prefer being a host or being a guest?
I guess I'm a little more comfortable hosting because I think that a lot of what I do is in that is in a way doing that. But I'm very grateful when I'm a guest. It's certainly really a great thing. So, and it's interesting you asked that particular question because um, Charles Ray Eames, who founded the Eames office that my siblings and I take care of, is they had this idea that the role of the designer is basically that of a good host, anticipating the needs of the guest, whether the guest is somebody sitting in this chair or somebody in the house or whatever, or just somebody reading a brochure. So it's interesting to ask that question because we as a family think about it a lot, and then in this capacity, one of the interesting things, for example, about these markers is that most people in most cultures, they try to orient themselves perpendicular to the text. And so that means that if we put some text in a certain place, if I orient it like this, I'll be saying that people say that here they'll be looking at that wall
horizontally.
Because that's why it's so annoying when you're on the bus and somebody reads the paper over your shoulder, like, get out of here, because they're trying to line up exactly with your eyes, and they can't do that. It's really irritating. So even that part is being a host to whoever's going to wander up to this site, and in that way it's a little bit like a movie because I'm pointing, people, guiding people to see certain things.
Amazing. The reason I think it's a good question is it's almost like fantasy,
It's true.
So I think you get away with a lot of that, I think, through your work, and I think that's a great thing. And I feel like it's a good example that we should all maybe
I think like. Yeah, I mean, I think that the
not criminally.
Yeah, no, not the criminal, but I think that when we do it in these, people always feel like it's the project's like graffiti, and it's the opposite because we do get permission, and because I want it to be there for. I always tell people I want their great-grandchildren to show my great-grandchildren what we did together, and so that's sort of the feeling of it.
Great. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Eames.
Oh boy,
this was such
You're
a
right.
pleasure.
It does go fast. Thank you so much.
I'll give you a hug.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for being a good host.
Super inspiring to listen to. It's like, yeah.
No, this is cool. This is cool.
Next time we'll do it at the Joshua Tree.
Yeah,
when we have a huge production, a trailer, hair and makeup, all these things.
I know. Terrible.